All right. Welcome, everybody. We've got Adam and we've got Kate from Enta Solutions here. And I couldn't be happier to bring this power duo to the stage, to the virtual stage, so to speak. I've had the pleasure of working with you guys, and we've got a couple exciting projects coming up, one of which is going to be delving into a science fiction book. Exactly. Yeah. So we're doing science fiction. And we're going to be creating it together. So this is a really, really interesting project, philosophically and artistically, and in terms of an author creation journey, right? So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Today was strategic.
Oh, may the 4th be with you. Yeah, may the
4th be with you.
May the 4th. Yes, exactly.
Are you ready?
That was Kate's idea. Yeah. Oh my goodness! You know, I've got to borrow you when my boys come over, because it's that energy, I think, would just captivate them. You're young. You're good with little kids, like teenagers, right? You know.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. We're on the same frequency.
Okay. Adam, what are you wearing there? What's going on with that nostalgic shirt?
May the 4th, right? It was a sci-fi book, so why not do an announcement launch on May the 4th? So this is my, my Star Wars Rebel Alliance shirt that I only bring out on special occasions. So, I'm ready.
Wow.
Committed. Let's do that.
Now, so I want to start off with the science fiction piece. We're going to talk about Enta and Enta Solutions, but just to start off, I want to talk about the science fiction piece. What gravitates either one of you and both of you to work on a joint project on science fiction? Like, what drives you to that sort of end?
Well, it wasn't originally going to be science fiction, so that in itself is a journey, right, Adam?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. For me, I love science fiction, fantasy, all this kind of stuff because, it's a fantastical world in which we imagine how the universe is such a big place, right? And we can maybe escape the, some of the problems in the world and some of the things going on, the pandemics, all that, and we can imagine going into outer space or to another dimension or who knows what.
Where they have even bigger problems.
Yeah, right. But then we can also, so we can imagine how politics might work in a world like that, or economics, religion. We can create this world where we can imagine how the human experience might be happening in that world. And I think that is the cool part of science fiction. We can get philosophical, we can get, kind of hardcore about it. We could, if we decided to make, hardcore science part of the plot, or we could just kind of graze over it and say, oh, there's a wormhole. Like, deal with it.
Yeah, Kate, what was your added piece to that? How do you view the genre as a landscape?
Oh, like fantasy, sci-fi is kind of like my brain candy, right? I'll read like a business book, and then I get to read brain candy book. It's like something fantastical, and mine is typically Harry Potter. Something with vampires and the kind of the magic realms. But I also enjoy, and I love Star Wars. So I enjoy that sci-fi side of things too. But that kind of world is just it's so interesting to me. And that's my jam. I could read those books over and over again.
Well, I couldn't be happier to be part of that particular project. Now I'm going to insert myself as a philosopher, as a sounding board, as somebody that can, take some of these ideas and give you guys some good feedback, hopefully good, and, but I'm curious, Adam brought up a point about, we could make this highly technical, and I'll put a lot of science and a lot of research in there. So, from an author standpoint, I'm gonna ask you guys a rather direct question. It's something you guys really need to think about as a first time producer of a science fiction novel. Is that your author profile actually starts to build and typecast an audience. So where I'm going with this, and then I'll pause and let you guys answer individually. The thing here is that with an author, you get a bit of a following. So if you take the position on a novel, on a science fiction novel, that you're going to be highly technical, and disappear in and out of existence, just as Kate did. Which
there's a wormhole. There was a wormhole. I'm back.
Show that gravitational lensing that you did earlier for me, please, Kate. Do that again. There we go. There's this effect that, I think that's amazing, right? Okay. So we have somebody on staff that's just absolutely pure energy. Literally, she's pure energy. That's what Kate is.
Yeah.
So my point is this, guys, is to say, what characteristics do we want to describe you as an author duo, right? Do you want to be known as an author duo, right, that are highly scientific in their worlds, right? Is it, once you write that novel, people are going to be hungry, as Kate describes it, for, well, I want to go back and read that second novel. You're going to be inundated by all these fans, right? So what do you guys think about your style? What kind of areas do you want to fill in? Highly technical, or just completely imaginary, or how do you envision that from a meta standpoint?
I think we can steer a little bit away from being, 100% scientifically accurate. I think the book, we're business consultants, so we're very philosophical about, like the human condition and psychology and how people work together and that kind of thing. So I envision a story that is a little bit more on the philosophical side. Now, if we can ground it in some real science, then much the better. I don't want it to be, we don't have to be completely airy-fairy, but I think that's also, why we're going to try and do this live and invite people to throw in comments. If someone wants to throw in, if Neil deGrasse Tyson wants to weigh in and say, well, actually, you can't orbit that planet that fast, that wouldn't work. I'm going to say, okay, well, let's see what we can do about that. But, do we need to get into microbiology and string theory or stuff like that? Maybe not.
Not so much.
I mean, we could always hire like an aerospace engineer. Oh wait, Adam is one.
So maybe we won't get away with it completely, but
we know enough to be dangerous, and definitely not enough to piss off the real big techies out there.
I've seen Star Trek. I love Star Trek. I can live in that kind of Star Trek-y world.
Well, that's the issue with technology. You actually have to draw a line, and you have to figure out how much backstory am I going to put in there, and then you can kind of get caught up in your, and trip over your own feet. And so, you really have to reconcile that against, where's the plot going? What are the obstacles? What are we doing? Are we fighting against something technical that just is almost impossible to weave into a story? So these are the kind of things that you're going to have to, put in, a realistic spin. And in the case of social commentary, which Adam brought up earlier, there is the point, which you're absolutely right, Adam, that the genre of science fiction does allow this escapist type of mentality. But what's really, I think, beautiful about the genre is that it also, we have this condition as readers that has we can't fully escape from it. So we're always counterpointing it to some degree with reality and with the way the world is. Mm-hmm. The example that I want to give is not science. It's not science fiction, but it's a really good example. And this particular one is just George Orwell's 1984, or, for example, the dystopian kind of approach, or Animal Farm, right? It's, people can draw those connections much easier than they can opposed to if you actually called them out, so to speak.
Yeah.
I love that. So this is what I love about sci-fi. I'm so excited that you brought this up, Daniel, because science fiction, good science fiction, in my opinion, is a human story. And I think, too often we try and write, or, if you talk about movies, these like spectacles that skip over the human story, right? Let's take Star Wars, for example, since I'm wearing the Star Wars shirt, right? Star Wars is an adventure story that takes place in space. Would I call it necessarily science fiction? Maybe not. It's in space from that point of view. Whereas if you take something like Star Trek, and I don't want to get into the Star Wars, Star Trek argument, or
people can do that below. Just comment below.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Exactly, right? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Right, it's highly philosophical, right? It's about a future where we made it. We kind of made it off the planet without killing each other, and now we're fighting in space. Or what was that show from the early 2000s that was so good? The remake from the 60s. I can't think of the name.
A little more description. So was it? It was in space.
Battlestar Galactica.
Firefly, is it? Oh.
Or Firefly. Battlestar Galactica, the remake. I don't know if you saw that.
The BSG. Who's with the BSG?
Yeah. It was amazing because it took place in space, but it was about people and kind of how they would react and how they would behave in certain situations and how the leadership would have to respond and do all that kind of stuff. So
Adam, help me fill this in, because I'm only pulling on just a fragment of memory here with Battlestar Galactica. I have this image in my head of the movie that I think it is, and it takes place in space, obviously, but the star of the show ends up being a young kid who's amazing at video games. And so he's steering this amazing ship, but he's like destroying
you're thinking of The Last Starfighter. That's also a great movie.
Right.
I nightmared as a kid about parts of that movie. But Battlestar Galactica is in the Last Starfighter. There's this scene where they come because he passed the video game and they take him into outer space and they leave like a clone in his place so that his parents, no one would freak out. But the clone kind of has to like grow, and it's kind of like gooey looking to start with, and it's like under his bed sheets. And that scene just like horrified me for most of my childhood.
While Adam's thinking about goo underneath his spreadsheet, his bed sheets. Kate, what was you were just into Harry Potter, and was that kind of the comparison?
Yeah, well, I guess that's where it all started for me was I wasn't really into any kind of fantasy until I picked up a Harry Potter book. And actually I didn't want to pick it up. I was laughing and making fun of people who are reading it, and I'm like, oh, come on, that's like a kid's book, at the time. And they're like, you need to read this. And I was like, no. And at the time I was actually in a play acting, and luckily it was just a dress rehearsal, because I was like, it's a 10 minutes to my scene, how good. And I picked up somebody's book and I started reading it. I missed my cue to get onto stage. They're calling me and I'm like, So, I was hooked. From that moment on, I was hooked into the fantasy world. And then it was, True Blood series and Twilight and all of those kind of magical realms, anything with wizardry, sign me up. Is so cool. And I think that's just being able to manifest just amazing things from the power within. And I think that translates really well too in what we're trying to talk about, which is, those human connections and how do you overcome these obstacles. And I mean, we're not, waving a wand, but we're doing amazing things as humans, and we can. So I love that sort of connection piece.
I think the thing about, I don't know so much about the Twilight series, but definitely with Harry Potter, there's something about Harry Potter that is, I think, so attractive in the character development. It's about that future potential of Harry, right? So when you put that, I mean, do we can't help but inhabit the protagonist, right? And so we can't help but think of ourselves as the version of Harry. And I think that seeing another character who has so much potential, unrealized potential, we just naturally root for that character in a way that we don't root, for a villain, right? This is something of goodness, of potential that we just really get behind.
And you know what I like about Harry too is that he's feeling the pressure, like which all kids do as they're going through those stages, the pressure to succeed, to feel like he grew up in a world without magic, and then all of a sudden he comes in and everybody's like, oh, you're supposed to be so great. And he's like, guys, like I'm literally starting from the beginning. And so for him to like take these steps and to jump into a world he never knew with all this pressure and still like remain humble and grow and go through those obstacles that he went through, like that's huge. And I think a lot of people relate to that. They relate to the pressure of the world, of to school, of to everything that they put on them to be great, this pressure to be great. And, that he doesn't do it alone. It's not like he's, Superman doing it all by himself, but he relies on his team and his friends. And when it comes down to it, that's us in this world, right?
Well, you guys definitely take that ethos into a brand, and I'm only going to dip my toe in the Enta waters here for a minute, but I think it's relevant to bring out the point that, and I hear from you guys say this, it's about doing something epic, right? And without really understanding what that epicness is, the energy is contagious. So, you're not giving any kind of prescriptive, here's how we do epicness, per se, but it's like, this is how we approach it. We want to do something epic. And, if we build on what Kate's point was there, this is what you guys are projecting, is you're saying, hey, you know what, we're not showing up to the party just, kind of, lackadaisical. We're going after this big time, right? So does that flow through? And are you guys successful with your clients when you do that sort of drum beating?
We pick our clients.
We kind of came across and kind of grew into this idea of epicness. We kind of call it the epic filter. So if we're creating something, we do business solutions, right? And sometimes that can be really fun, like team building. Other times it can be pretty dry, like writing procedures or stuff like that. So we're like, okay, can we take something as mundane and dry as like a procedure, and how can we make it epic, right? How can we give it to someone, and are they going to say, this is freaking epic, right? And that's kind of the philosophy we try and take. So, we try and add a little bit of color to things like that, a little bit of artistry, play with the fonts, try and sprinkle in company values into that, stuff like that, like a little bit of humanity into it, so that when you look at it, you can see maybe a reflection of yourself or the business that you're working in. So to us, that's epic in that context.
It's funny story. We were you've heard our journey before, and we've talked about it a lot, where when the pandemic hit, we lost everything and we didn't know what to do, and we changed, and then we came to the point where we embraced the digital world, and it saved our business. But when we hired an employee, it was really interesting. We had to write our first employee agreement, right? And from almost dying out to growing exponentially in 5 months was a journey in itself. But when we wrote that employee agreement, I remember Adam sent it over to me. He's like, hey, have a read of our employee agreement. And I looked at it and I didn't know what to say to Adam, because I was like, he put in all this effort, he got it done, and we needed to get it done. And I was like, but it looks like every other employee agreement. So I called him up and I just said, I was thinking we have this opportunity to be epic. And I no longer got the words out of my mouth. And Adam had like 100 ideas of how it was going to look like the next version of it. He's like, we could do this, we can do this. And he took it away. And this employee agreement is like, you read it and you go, yeah, I need to be a part of this team. And it was funny because we sent it out to our very first employee. And he wrote back, first off, I want to say I've never seen anything like this. It is epic.
Yeah.
And then he agreed to come on board, and we've grown since there. But it's like the little things, like we didn't need to make it epic, but it's who we are and it's our filter. It's who we're going to be.
I got it. You've just tantalized me and therefore the listeners. What was in this as an example? Give me something from this handbook or this agreement. Like, what was it that was?
Imagine a movie poster.
Imagine
an employment letter inviting you to, join a team was a movie poster, and maybe like a series of movie posters. That's what it looks like. So we try to keep the writing to the minimum. A bunch of like pictures, diagrams, but the front is your mission if you choose to accept it, and it has a fuse like Mission Impossible.
Oh yeah. So, like a handbook too. The HR department comes up with a handbook and they force people to read it, especially if it's done after the fact, and then no one ever reads it again. Not even the management. They don't even, So
and one of my favorite parts is like the very first page, really, they come to, and it talks about why we care about them, and not just what they're going to do for our business, but all of them and how we want to see them succeed as a whole person.
Yeah.
And I think that
you have a template for more people to come on because the team's going to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And has grown. And everybody's commented on that employee letter.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. But it's not just ENTA. You're transporting or transplanting that into other business entities. And now if I take the word business and I slash that off, I've been a business owner my entire life. This is an ethos in itself of how we actually work with people. And so my concern is that somebody who's a serial entrepreneur, somebody that is trying to make a difference in the world and trying to choose the business activity that they do. I mean, look, Adam and Kate, you guys could do anything you want. You could sell staplers out the back end of a truck and in parking lots if you really wanted to. But there's something that's driving you towards this type of activity, and that's our choice. And the difficult thing, and where we see leadership emerge, is that if we've got any scalable type of success, I think that requires some celebration. Because it's difficult. It's difficult to, raise to some sort of, cream of the crop, so to speak. It's difficult to surface in that aggregate. And when we do, well, that's, congratulations. I think that's a really great thing, especially in a pivot. That's the new word, right? We pivoted, the COVID pivot. We pivoted and we came out, in a new direction, and we're growing. And that's important. Yeah.
It's, this is kind of our version of trying to do something original, right? There's lots of people out there very, very talented and do great work and offer some of the same services that we do. So we're like, how can we differentiate ourselves, and how can we let our personality show into this, right? My wife watches our stuff. She's like, you guys are such losers. Unapologetically so, right? Like, yeah, I'm wearing a Star Wars shirt. It's May the 4th. Of course I am. What else could I have done?
Okay.
Nerds unite.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you guys a couple primers, and I want you to use a technique that I call free form association. Okay. Now, you're going to know these terms because they're directly from your webpage. Okay. So the first one is culture slip.
Yeah.
Now, the only thing I'm going to say about it is stuck in the past and culture slip, because these are the two the two concepts on that point. What can you guys tell me about? Why is that a problem? I mean, other than the obvious, but elaborate on that a little bit.
So you ever You said you've always been an entrepreneur, but have you ever worked for like a bigger corporation?
Yes.
In your
Yeah.
experience?
Yeah. Earlier in my career, I worked for a company called Cisco, the food service distributing company.
Oh,
Yeah. So.
Okay. You ever hear the older generation of the company talk about the good old days? This happens a lot, right? As companies grow, when it's the entrepreneurial mindset, small business, everybody's so jazzed up, and whether they've defined a culture or not, there's a culture there, right? And usually everybody loves it, and because they love it, they're so passionate. You can't stop it from growing. It grows, right? Everybody's invested. But as it grows and it grows and it grows, if you haven't defined that culture, right, and actually embedded it into your processes, into what you do, into your operations, into your decision making, then it just will naturally, fluidly become a series of people's subcultures. Naturally, right? Because you're not reinforcing it, and you're not hiring with it. You're not, firing with it. It'll just become this thing. So culture slip happens if you're not intentionally defining it and reinforcing it in all aspects of what you do, right? So that's one of the big things that we found is that, companies either don't define it, or they've thrown some words up on the wall and said, there's our culture, but they don't act by it. Right. And culture slips.
Yeah.
Adam, did I capture that? Would you say?
Absolutely. There's just a dilution that happens with the more people, right? It's just people do things. Everyone comes to work to do their best, so they will do things with their slight little spin on it, and that person's slight little spin on it, and this person's slight little spin on it. And then a difficult situation arises and someone makes a choice, whatever. And then, slowly there's a little bit of inconsistency as to who you are from when you were smaller. And that's why we see these, then it becomes pockets where there's great leadership here and there, and where there's not great leadership.
Okay. Well, see now, Kate is pure energy, and Adam does a freeze frame. He just can use his entire body, and his one hand there, it actually is actually like half in this reality and half not in this reality. So that's really.
See, it's the wormhole, but it's moving. So
I think it's the special. I think it's actually Kate has special superpowers, and now we're discovering what Adam's superpowers are. He can freeze the statue, and he's going to come back in.
He'll come back in. We'll let him back in.
Yeah. Okay, so here's where I want to go with this, Kate. I want to pull it back to the book and the science fiction piece. Okay, so now this is a little bit of a left turn again, and I say, okay, so let's imagine an organization, and it go a little bit wider on an organization, because we don't know what. I'm not making any assumptions about how people group together in the imaginary Adam and Kate world here. But does a culture slip have the potential to happen in this inhabited new space as well?
I absolutely think that that's going to be the biggest problem.
Wow, interesting. Yeah.
Right. Like Adam and I don't think we want to get into the details yet, but we've got some things kind of brewing here. But essentially, and we're feeling it now. Like, we want to talk about, this is sci-fi, it'll be set in the future. But right now we're seeing such an impact, right? With us being remote, with us not connecting with our teams, with us, being on Zoom calls and Zoom exhaustion and all that stuff. We're seeing a culture slip that's going to have impacts years down the road. It's happening. We're in it.
I think this couldn't be more relevant. And the issue is, I want to bring up 2 points. One of them is climate change, which I'm a big climate change guy. Now, you guys are from Alberta, just like my family is, right? So I battle with my family, because my family is saying, wait a minute, oil's just the way it is. Just get used to it. We're heading towards an abyss, and the world's going to end. Fine, so be it. Don't worry about it, kind of thing, right?
Okay.
And I want to salvage the family relationship. So I'm, I'd rather spend time with my family. So it's not about the fight, but
Agree to disagree, right? You agree
yeah,
to disagree.
we just agree to disagree. Now, the issue, this really resonates with me, where it's the fast change in culture. I mean, you take the United States, for example, there's a huge car culture, right? About getting on the highway and getting into the open road, and it's your automobile starts to define who you are, and so on and so forth. So in this fictional world, you have the ability to grab different things onto people that say what their identity is. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Which can actually poke fun of that sort of like attachment that we have to these material things. That's fascinating. I can't wait. That's really cool.
And this is what I love about fantastical stories, right? Because you can take something kind of sensitive like oil or climate change, where people have very polarized points of view. And if I just talk about that, then someone's going to get offended or someone's going to misunderstand or something. But if I take that same scenario and I put it in outer space on a different planet with a moon and some aliens and maybe some Ewok in there too.
Avatar,
there you go, Avatar. All of a sudden people are watching it and you've tricked them. They're not offended. They're entertained, and yet you've made a statement about something. And people walk away maybe thinking about it, but they haven't been offended. So you kind of like slip it past the goalie, so to speak, which, that's what I love about good sci-fi or good fantasy, right?
Yeah, it even slipped past Disney, and it's in the animal kingdom. They got the whole big tree of life and all this kind of stuff. And, it just
right?
subconsciously it's changing people, that they don't know this type of thing. But, Disney's this perfect example of mass media that's able to get these feel-good stories from years past, right? Tales of like redistributed stories from the past, and then the new ones like Avatar, the movie. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Oh yeah, like the newest Marvel show, The Falcon and Winter Soldier, right? The entire thing was about Black Lives Matter, which was an incredibly, polarizing topic in 2020 and still is. But they take it, you throw Captain America and some Avengers in there. All of a sudden, they made a very clear, respectful statement about it, and it was amazing. Yeah. So,
Kate, I want to bring up a point of male versus female for an instant. I've got two young boys, and they're in school, and they feel a push towards elevating females in their class, for some reason, and really kind of giving them the first, kick at the can kind of thing, right? But it's interesting that the young boys are feeling this type of odd behavior, right? Now, the direct question that I want to ask you is that you're watching Harry Potter, and in the imagination of a young girl, I'm going to say, is it true that you could look at Harry Potter and not think that he's boy or he's girl, that he's a hero, and hero means hero regardless of whether it's boy or girl? Does that ring true?
When I was reading it, I put myself into Harry Potter's shoes. His gender wasn't really something I considered. I was imagining myself in his shoes. So it's really interesting. You can write a book with a gender like that, but it be applicable to all people. And I mean, gender is something that social bias we put on ourselves, right? And not necessarily. It's not about the parts you were born with. It's about society's expectations based off of, your biological makeup. So it's really interesting how our brain allows us to jump in and out of that when we're reading.
Yeah, I think the danger zone, and I think the danger zone may creep in if it ends up being, because he's still youthful, and there's still something shared in youth between boys and girls that hasn't quite bifurcated, right? But if it's older to the point where the dude is trying to get the girl, and that's the prize. That's somewhere where I think there's, a bit of a repetitive scene in Hollywood where it's like, it's not always that women are the, kind of the end goal here, right? Like he saves the day, and now, I kind of like flutter in his arms kind of thing, right? That might be the, that might be the, what's that?
This is actually, we've been having this conversation recently because one of the fun things we did on our YouTube channel was, take some famous movie lines and like entize them a little bit and then like act them out. And I did a bunch, and then Kaylin was going to do some, but she was looking for inspirational movie lines from women that weren't like about love or something like that. And she really had a hard time finding one that was like, that powerful movie speech from a female character.
All the monologues were like about like herself and having to like either find love or discover love or self-love, right? Versus like an inspirational speech given to others just to inspire others, right? Like you look at Braveheart, or what's the Inch by Inch guy, right? And
Al Pacino,
Al Pacino, and like where it has nothing to do with themselves. It has to do with them inspiring others. So if anybody like watches this and can think of a monologue from a girl where she's inspiring others, I would love to. Yeah. Because I struggled. I couldn't find something. Everything was about love.
Yeah.
Which is important, but.
So let me switch it's like a value system switch for a minute. Okay, so let's say that the value switch was that now I'm going to play into some stereotypes here, but you got to give me some room to hang myself here. So if the stereotypes were reality was a matriarchy, okay, so that the woman was really, that this is like some sort of like Wonder Woman spinoff, right? So the woman is absolutely like the dudes are just like there to kind of do what we do, right? But the women are really, they're ruling the world here, right? And so the values are about. Look, I'm really going to get. It's not that I'm going to get in trouble, but I gotta position this correctly to say that the fundamental virtues of the woman class is of emotional empathy, love, tender, caring, organizing, these types of things. Okay. Now I can get into like a framework of where we came from our primate ancestors, right? But I'm not going to do that. My point here is that if that was the valued, if that was the perceived end goal and the most valuable characteristics in our society, then which of the two, male or female, would be better off to execute on this type of thing naturally? And so it's a rhetorical use of the question. But if women were just better at that type of thing, now we're saying, well, what if the value of society's changed towards that end, right? If there was more focus on that type of thing, so that the monologues, the dialogues, they push towards that type of thing as opposed to overcoming an obstacle and conquering and, these kinds of inspirational things. It was more about making like connections with people. It was about organizing what you have. This kind of dialogue. What if the value system changed?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it absolutely would change. Like if you flipped it on its head and it was like you said, a matriarchy, like the values would change, but that's not where the power is. It's not a matter of flipping it from one to the other, in my opinion. I mean, go ahead and troll me below, but in my opinion, like it's like this, okay? You have an individual with strengths, and the strengths look like this. They're spiky, right? And we just went through a strengths exercise with these amazing people. And so this is kind of at the forefront of my brain. It's like this. And like men have strengths in certain areas and women, like you said, have strengths in certain areas. But all you would do if you flipped it is it would just look different. Okay. It's just like you switch your hand, right? What you want is well-rounded by integrating. Right. That gives you well-rounded. Now you're not so spiky with strengths here and not weaknesses, but not as strong points in the middle, right? Think about fully integrating. Boom, now you've got coverage.
Well, and I think, Daniel, you kind of stumbled onto, one of the important themes we want to include in this book is that idea of integrating a team that is very different and has such very different strengths and different cultures even, right? And we can do that, in a way that's really interesting and see the effect, of the personal growth, right? The internal journey as well as the external journey of the people, around. So, we have this vision of writing a story from like one character's point of view, but then having also a lot of strange characters that come in and out. And then maybe we write that story and we finish it. And then we can go back and write the same story and even have some of the same scenes, but from a different character's point of view and see what happens to that character.
Right. That's interesting. That's really fascinating. That's
really we can marvel it a little bit, right? Then we thought, hey, then we can have fun with all sorts of characters. We could have teenagers, what happens from the point of view of a teenager if this kind of culture comes in or whatever, or, a man or a woman or a leader or an employee or a neighbor or whatever. We can play with that world and just kind of play with a cascading effect of a singular series of events.
It's amazing what logic does. Really, when you're using, culture to spread it, right? It's very interesting, the causal relationship of these thought patterns, right? The consequence. So, and they're inhabited by our characters. Leo Tolstoy, right? He wrote about his character Anna Karenina, that this sadness filled him as he was reaching the end of this massive story, because his writing, his authorship inhabits the character. And then as the character begins to take on a life of its own. Now, not literally, obviously, but it does. It has, you can't change the direction that this woman is at, because she has certain characteristics that would just be antithetical with her character. So you start to develop this person, and this person takes shape, forms these like logical sort of strings, and it kind of just naturally moves towards a certain goal, right? And so, yeah, I always remember that about one of the the greatest writers of our past, and I, that keep that in mind about how you do the character development, or I'm sure we will, because we're going to have something that is really on display for the audience, and that's.
I think that's a really good way to just kind of end it off here, because that's what we want to do. We want to talk about culture is obviously going to be a big theme, and characterization. We want to see the journey that these characters go on, both philosophically and politically. We want to throw that in there, and then we want to take it and put it in space, and we want to invite people to throw in their 2 cents and kind of guide us as to
they can be a part of it.
Yeah.
We can give them a shout out at the end of the book.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we have the ability to engage with people and, change what authorship means. And just like you guys say, your ethos as a, consulting company is we're going to make it epic. And heck, why can't you make something so important like literature, which does last, it embeds itself into culture? Why can't we do that with what we're doing in terms of our, consulting services and, how we make, the people around us better? So Adam's absolutely right. That's a perfect way to end the first premiere episode. And I really want to encourage anybody and everybody to tune in bi-weekly for this dynamic duo with me as the tag-along. So guys, is there anything else you want to say in a closing sort of salutation to the ever-growing fan base?
It's going to be epic, and we're really excited for everybody to join us, and we're excited to go on this journey with you and for you to challenge us. And we just brushed the surface on some really interesting topics. We're going to get into it. So I'm super excited for that, and really appreciate Planksip and you, Daniel, for helping us along this journey.
Nice. Adam?
Just say, roads, where we're going, we don't need roads.
Okay, guys. You guys are awesome. You guys are epic. And until next time, thank you very much.
Thanks, Daniel.